This Real Agriculture podcast is brought to you by Genesis Fertilizers. Nitrogen fertilizer is your farm's #1 expense. Farmers are working together through Genesis Fertilizers to solve the problem of high prices and security of supply by planning a state-of-the-art nitrogen plant. Security and earnings through ownership is the solution. Visit Genesis today at genesisfertilizers.com to learn more.
I'm Shaun Haney, and this is RealAg on the Weekend. Let's get real and get connected with the week that was in Canadian agriculture. RealAg on the Weekend starts now. Welcome to RealAg on the Weekend. I'm your host, Shaun Haney of RealAgriculture.com. It is great to be with you here, everybody out there in the audience on 650 CKOM and 980 CGME. Brr. Old man Winter has shown his ugly old face this week. Yikes. For those of you that have started calving season, this is a test of your intestinal fortitude, and I'm sure there's more than once this week some of you that have started calving are like, why do we calve at this time of the year? Anyway, it's we love it, right? Yes, and it was also this week crop production show in Saskatoon. So for all the crop farmers, they had to really some bad roads, cold weather, wintry conditions, and try to get safely to Saskatoon and take part at Prairieland Park in one of Saskatchewan's biggest indoor farm shows. And it was a busy week this week in Saskatchewan agriculture. We're going to have it all covered. We're actually also going on in Saskatoon this week because it is crop production show. The crop commissions in Saskatchewan had their annual general meetings, and that's exactly what we're going to focus today's show. So happened to have a chat with Tracy Broughton. She's the executive director at Sask Canola. Carl Potts is the executive director at Saskatchewan Pulse Growers. And as well, Brett Halstead is the past chair of Sask Wheat. So Jake Legui will be from Fillmore, will be the new chair of Sask Wheat. So when Brett was on his way home, he pulled over on the side of the road and we recorded an interview. Is reflected on his time as chairman and on some of the things that happened at the AGM. So we're really honing in on the ag policy stuff here this week from a Saskatchewan perspective. If you have any feedback on today's show, you can send me an email, shaney@realagriculture.com. You can also, of course, call that RealAg feedback line, 855-776-6147. So let's dig in. We're going to start with Tracy Broughton. She's the executive director at Sask Canola. They had an amalgamation vote. Sask Canola and Sask Flax are looking to become one. Here's my conversation with Tracy Broughton.
So about a year ago, or just over a year ago, the Sask Canola and Sask Flax board got together, discussed Sask Canola providing basically operational support to Sask Flax. So basically we've been operating as one staff for both of the two different boards over the last year. Last year at our AGM, the boards brought forward resolutions to explore amalgamation. So survey the membership, see what it might look like, how we might make sure that we could work well together and ensure that we would be able to provide value for both the canola and the flax levy appropriately. So this week we were able to bring that back to the membership, and it was unanimous for both organizations to move ahead with amalgamation.
Okay, so what are the next steps? What does that look like? Because there's a number of these that are either in progress or completed, like Alberta Grains, for example, was Alberta Wheat and Barley. And one thing I learned in that situation was this is not quick. So what are the next steps for you in order to make this all happen?
So the next steps are over the next couple of months, the Sask Canola board and Sask Flax board will be working with Agri-Food Council to update our regulations so that we can legally adopt the mandate of Sask Flax. We're going to be tracking the levies separately so that we can invest those dollars appropriately into the development of each crop, and then figuring out what governance looks like going forward. Also, what our brand looks like what do we present ourselves to growers as. We didn't make any of these decisions before our boards didn't make any final decisions before the AGMs, because obviously we wanted to bring it forward to the membership, make sure that they were in favor.
So from canola's perspective, why flax? Like, what's the match there that makes this seem like it's such a you said unanimous, so there's a pretty strong feeling on this. What's the match?
Well, farmers grow a basket of crops, and so from our board's perspective, they like the diversity of the crop rotation in Saskatchewan. There's also synergies with it being the oilseed complex. We have in Saskatchewan, we have several commodity groups, and we've often supported, some of the smaller groups, just making sure that farmer programs are there and available, and we're using our levy dollars to support growers and their farm profitability.
It's interesting to keep the levy dollar separate so that you can do, but there probably is some collaborative shared, when you think about the oil seeds in general, there's probably some common projects there.
Yeah, there definitely will be. And we'll be able to, have a proportion for administration for each crop based on like the amount of time that some things will take. There's areas of, overlap with respect to things like policy, market development, public trust, like those kinds of things that we invest in. There are research projects that have both crops included, like even like soil projects. I think tracking the levy separate just helps with a little bit of accountability and explanation back to the growers. It's also two different levies. So it's 75 cents a ton for canola versus over $2 for flax. Flax straw also has a levy. And so just giving us some time to really adopt that as staff and manage it, and the board to manage it as well. Tracking it'll just help us make sure that we're able to report back to our growers. So maybe in the future it would be one once we could figure out the right balance.
Saskatchewan oil seeds, kind of. Now, well, that's one suggestion for you for the brand. The other there's so okay, I'll ask the question. This is like this is the beginning of a little bit of the potential snowball here. Does it stop here, or how much more room is there for more consolidation in this space? Right, like we're starting to see groups like we've got wheat and winter cereals together. We've got, like I mentioned, other provinces. So, Ontario did this a long time ago with wheat and corn and soybeans to create the Grain Farmers of Ontario. So there is models out there. Is this the beginning of a larger snowball where we could see a lot more consolidation going forward?
I think that'll be driven by our growers. We definitely, it's definitely starting some conversations. There are some growers that feel very strongly that we should have, one group representing everyone. I've heard that. I've been in the Saskatchewan ag industry for over a decade now, and I've heard some people say that. I've heard other farmers say that, we need to have lots of farm representation because we want to make sure we have grassroots, lots of farmers being represented. So I think it is a bigger, longer conversation. With flax and canola, that's just one small part of it.
Yeah. Do you have an estimate on potential cost savings or synergies? Like you mentioned that you were, the two groups were sharing a staff already, which is I think a common first step that in some of these other situations. Now that bringing the two groups together officially, where are some of those opportunities?
I don't have the hard numbers for you, but we definitely, like when you think about Flax had an office space before, which they don't need anymore. So, there's savings in rent and all the utilities and all of those sorts of things. One audit versus two audits. So right there, that saves a few $1,000s. They are paying a fee for the administrative services, but they have access to a group of 10 staff versus having like one individual who's kind of covering all the bases. And that was one of the things that the chair of Sask Flax talks about during the canola EGM as well, is that It just it opened a lot of opportunities in terms of having specialized staff working on different things.
Well, Tracy, thanks a lot for joining us here. Really, really appreciate it. And I'm sure I will see you some point during all of the winter meeting season. So thanks a lot and congratulations on an AGM.
Thank you very much. It's good to talk to you as well.
It was Tracy Broughton. She's executive director with Sask Canola as well as Sask Flax. Okay, so now that we've talked about canola, we're going to move on to talk about pulses. And the Sask Pulse grower meeting did not disappoint. There was lots of heated debate back and forth between farmers on plant breeding. We'll hear from Carl Potts all about that resolution that hit the floor when we come back. You're listening to RealAg on the Weekend here on 650 CKOM and 980 CGME.
If you're involved in the agriculture industry, it's important to stay informed on all the latest issues affecting your business. At RealAgriculture.com, we offer fast, reliable news, information, and insights to help you keep on top of all of the latest in Canadian agriculture. Visit RealAgriculture.com and sign up for our free daily newsletter covering everything from news, agronomy, animal agriculture, and much more. Visit RealAgriculture.com/subscribe today.
There's a reason we call it the Corn School. Videos on everything from planter setup to weed control, field trial results, and the latest yield strategies. The Corn School on RealAgriculture.com has the information and advice you need to help you succeed. Brought to you by Pride Seeds and BASF. Corn School episodes are available at cornschool.com, from RealAgriculture.com, or as a podcast in your favorite podcast app. Check out the latest Corn School episode today.
Nitrogen fertilizer is your farm's #1 expense. Farmers are working together through Genesis Fertilizers to solve the problem of high prices and security of supply by planning a state-of-the-art nitrogen plant. You can find out more by going to genesisfertilizers.com. Okay, now we're going to move on to pulses. So we had a chance to chat with Carl Potts, executive director at Saskatchewan Pulse Growers. And a lot of discussion at that meeting was about a resolution that came from the floor about the plant breeding agreement that Saskatchewan Pulse Growers has with Lima Grain and the potential use of SVUAs. We talked about that and some of the research priorities for Saskatchewan Pulse Growers in this conversation with Carl Potts. You spent, I would say, really a focus there on talking about revenue and expenses. And, going back in time, there was a big cut to the levy. You really have worked your way back to the upside from a revenue standpoint, really tried to go back and kind of explain kind of where the organization has been.
Yeah, that's right. As growers know, markets, can move quickly, and our revenue is really very closely tied to, to lentil and pea prices in particular. So when, prices are rising, revenues are rising quickly, and when they're falling, they're moving the other way. But on the expenditure side, we make, 60% of our budget is invested into research, which is multiple year research projects. So the ability to ramp up or to scale back annual investments in research to match revenue is very, very difficult. So what we do is we try to hold a significant amount of reserves to be able to buffer those ups and downs. It just so happens now we're more on that building phase with very strong prices, in pulses, and a few years where we have had lower levels of investment in research because we came through, those lower revenue years when India put import duties on pulses and all those other things. So we're building back. We're back to balance for our current fiscal year budget, and we have some real strong plans to make investments of $14 million out of our $19 million reserve into high priority research areas for growers.
Now, I would imagine that there is definitely some projects that are committed to root rot and Aphanomyces. That would shock me if it wasn't on the table. What are some of the other things that are being committed to here from a research standpoint?
Well, you're right. Root disease, Aphanomyces is really the top research priority. We're already making significant investments there, but we have plans to increase that even more through scientific research projects, with researchers. There'll be some announcements, I think, in the coming days of some additional investments there. We're also looking at, how can we help develop and increase capacity of disease nurseries. So if we want to do more research, support more research, we need to have the capacity in disease nurseries, for example. But, really the second highest priority for research is around weed management and pulses. Pulses aren't good competitors with weeds in many cases. And like many crops, we're running into more problems with herbicide-resistant weeds. So that's an area that we want to refocus our efforts and really build a long-term program around weed management and pulses. So that's what some of our staff are working on over the course of this year is to really build up that program so that we can make new commitments and new investments in research. But in addition to that, we have chickpea, health issues, disease-related issues, in chickpeas, as well as funding many other areas of research. Agronomy would be another important component.
So, Carl, all those problems or challenges that you're doing research on to try to come up with some solutions for growers, those cross provinces, and they also cross into some of the northern tier states that are also interested in growing pulse crops. How much collaboration on the research so that we're not duplicating projects, so to speak, or there's only so many grower dollars out there from a research perspective. We got to make sure we're spending it as efficiently as possible. How much collaboration is there between not only the provinces, but some of the northern states?
Yeah, it's really, collaboration is a huge focus for us on research. So a few years ago, we started, from a strategy perspective of really developing a national strategy for research. And that was within Canada with the other pulse grower organizations and Pulse Canada. And what it's really letting us do is, whenever we fund research, most of it is very highly leveraged. I talked about today, last year we supported an additional 34 projects, $11 million of SPG investment, leveraging an additional $35 million of other funders. So very highly coordinated, very collaborative. Sometimes that means that it takes a little bit longer to get research projects put in place, but we know that making good use of grower dollars, high leverage, and coordination with other groups is very, very important.
Now, plant breeding, this is always a highly discussed topic at SPG meetings. How close are you? You mentioned in the meeting today that you have an agreement with Lima Grain that's been in place for 3 years. I think about. You're working on another agreement with the CDC at the University of Saskatchewan. How close are you to having that deal put together?
Yeah, I think we're very close. We're expecting in the next half year or so that we will have a new agreement in place with the CDC, and we're really excited about that. We've had a long history of working collaboratively with the Crop Development Center at the university. We have taken some time, both CDC and SPG, to sort of chart the course, in new direction for the future, and we're really excited about that. But it's a big change and a big transition, and it's important that we talk about that at annual general meetings like today. And we did have a very thorough and rigorous discussion about that. But so SPG for the future will be making new investments with a multitude of breeding partners. Lima Grain was one of our first ones, but we will be also making partnerships and new investments with public breeding companies as well. We think it's both public and private breeders and researchers that are needed in order to tackle the challenges and opportunities, not only for today, but for the future impulses.
By listening to the discussion today, as yourself and the chairman were talking about this subject, it doesn't sound like the new CDC agreement will be like the old one in the sense of it won't be royalty free.
Yeah, that's true. It was very clear from the CDC when our previous agreement was ending that they were interested in a new model and a new partnership where they would have multiple sources of funding, but they also would generate some of the revenue for their program through royalties. So that's why we've been talking at AGMs and winter meetings and other things for the last 2 or 3 years about how that model is changing. That royalties are coming, but we're excited about the opportunity that that's going to present to bring new varieties, faster genetic gain by creating an environment where multiple breeders and multiple scientists can all be working on pulses. So we're excited about our agreement with Lima Grain. We're excited about our new potential agreement with Crop Development Center, and I think there'll be more to come.
We'll have more of my conversation with the Executive Director of Saskatchewan Pulse Growers, Carl Potts, when we come back on RealAg on the weekend here on 650 CQM and 980 CJM.
The Canola School on RealAgriculture.com is your one-stop shop for everything a canola grower needs. Check out our free video series on YouTube for all the latest in canola agronomy, research, marketing, and more. Don't have time to watch? Download the podcast version of the Canola School on RealAgriculture.com or anywhere you download your podcasts. Stay on top of all things canola with the Canola School on RealAgriculture.com, brought to you by BASF and Invigor Hybrid Canola.
The next generation is the future of agriculture, but how do we launch from one role to leading? From succession planning and family dynamics to understanding finances and making the tough calls to discovering paths others have taken all through agriculture, the Successors Podcast covers it all. Tune in with me, your host, Kara Oosterhuis, simply by searching The Successors on your favorite podcast platform, or you can find it by visiting www.realagriculture.com.
Whether you're seeding, harvesting, or anything in between, the Wheat School on RealAgriculture.com has you covered. Timely agronomic information from industry experts available online anytime. Give your wheat crop a good start and a great finish with the Wheat School on RealAgriculture.com. Brought to you by C&M Seeds, Syngenta Canada, and the Alberta Wheat and Barley Commission.
Welcome back to RealAg on the weekend. I want to remind everybody, Monday nights, 7 o'clock Central Time, Real Agriculture hosts a live primetime show on YouTube. You can also watch it on Twitter and our Facebook page as well. But if you go to the Real Agriculture YouTube page, it's The Agronomist, and it's hosted by Lindsay Smith. Here's the best part. You can also get CCA and CU credits as well. So check it out. It's The Agronomist on the Real Agriculture YouTube page, 7 o'clock on Monday nights. Let's continue my conversation with Carl Potts, Executive Director with Saskatchewan Pulse Growers. Carl had just finished talking to us about why he's excited about these new plant breeding agreements. There is other players out there that are attractive.
Yeah, pulses, though, are a small crop globally, a small set of crops globally. So there aren't a huge number of companies that are banging down the door to make breeding investments for crops that are just a few million acres in Canada. They're a big crop in Canada, but globally we're still very small relative to all the big the big crops. But even canola and other crops that we grow in Canada are much larger in Canada and globally than pulses are. So it's about picking the right partners, long-term partners, both public and private, that we think can all work collaboratively to achieve new potential for farmers.
Well, you alluded to the resolution, the debate. There was a pretty good back and forth from some of the delegates about a resolution. The resolution, I don't need to read it verbatim, but essentially was the resolution was about SPG not supporting breeding programs that were going to be doing SVUAs in the future. The resolution was voted down by the delegates. I guess, what can you tell our audience about why the SVUA model is something that the board has chosen to pursue with Lima Grain in that agreement, and is also talking to CDC about it?
Yeah, and I want to make it clear. I think we see the vision and the opportunity for this model, not only for a Lima Grain agreement, but for other ones as well. A couple of things. It's becoming increasingly expensive to solely fund pulse breeding programs or breeding programs with grower dollars only. We saw that in the escalation of costs over time with our previous agreement. So we expect to be a partial funder alongside other collaborators in multiple breeding agreements. But in order to create that investment environment where new and additional investment, both public and private, come to the pulse sector, we need to have an opportunity for those organizations to generate some revenue from those new varieties. We think that that's good for farmers too, because it'll be then those organizations that are generating the varieties that farmers are growing, which will be the ones that will be receiving royalties. So farmers can effectively vote with their choices on on varieties. The other thing that's important to stress there is that we feel farmers will always have choice. We've committed to to keeping existing royalty-free varieties available to farmers. So any new agreements and new varieties that come out with VUAs or other sorts of royalties associated with it have to be worth the money that's being charged. So there'll be competition in the system, and we think that farmers will benefit from that.
So yeah, this decommissioning or removing old varieties was a big, several farmers brought this up in the meeting. Based on what I heard, this Saskatchewan Pulse Growers, you have control of those old royalty-free varieties. You just said you're not intending to remove those from the market.
Absolutely. Those varieties were funded by grower investment. We have we have royalty-free access to those varieties. They're already commercialized. They're out there growing. Farmers can continue to grow those, with no seed royalties, no farm-safe seed royalties as far as they go. And we think that that's a very important competitive check. So it's a high hurdle then for any new companies coming to the market to be able to bring forward varieties. But our board discussed this a lot and said, well, we don't want to be just paying high costs for Me Too varieties. So, with those existing varieties out there and being continuously available, the new varieties just, need to be better before they're going to get much market share.
I think, I would imagine that, and I've actually toured the Lima Grain facility in Saskatoon myself. I've seen it with my own eyes. A variety comes out, this was brought up as well, but a variety comes out that solves the root rot issue, at least in some regard. I wonder what the discussion is after that, because that would be bringing, there's yield, and then there's like solving a major problem and a huge threat to the pulse acre in the province of Saskatchewan and beyond its borders. That really right now I think is the holy grail for breeders to solve that problem. Boy, that's a pathway to all of a sudden, I think maybe some of the opinions changing about this. Maybe, I don't know. That's my thought.
Well, we spent a lot of time meeting with farmers and winter meetings and other places that we can engage with growers. And we know long-term pea and lentil growers that have said, I've needed to move away and move out of pulses because of Phantomyces and root disease related issues. So it's a big deal. And, and those growers and other growers have said to us, if there can be a variety that's resistant or partially resistant, like that's going to be a game changer, and they're willing to pay more. I think what we hear in some of the debate here today is a fear about having to pay higher seed costs, but there has to be this balance between between value from a new variety and and increased costs. And what growers have been telling us is that if there can be stepwise change in yields, like big bumps in yields, if there can be additional herbicide tolerances in lentils, if there can be a Phantomyces resistance or other disease resistance in pulses, they're willing to pay more for that because it brings more value to their operations.
Did the SVUA revenue, some of that obviously goes back to the breeder. Does some of that money come back to, is the intention for some of that money to come back to Saskatchewan Pulse Growers to compensate them for the original levy dollars that went in to the variety development?
Exactly. As our board was debating, the new direction in pulse crop support and breeding, this notion of growers paying twice is something that we talked a lot about. And so that's why it's an important principle for any new investment that we're going to be making into pulse crop breeding. If we're going to invest grower dollars up front, that we need to be receiving a share of those royalties on the back end. And that's part of the way that we can deal with this legitimate question and concern about growers paying twice. Now, it doesn't flow back directly to those growers, but we can reinvest those dollars into breeding research, into other forms of research for the benefit of farmers. And maybe over time, longer down the road, when you and I maybe are doing other things, we'll be to a point where some of these breeding programs can be a little bit more self-sustainable, and we may not have to invest as much grower levy dollars upfront. But it was really clear to us that there's need for upfront investment right now, in order to make programs sustainable. we'll see where things go for the future.
Well, Carl, hey, really appreciate you joining me. I know you got to get to a reception, so thanks so much for joining us here. We've been talking to Carl Potts, Executive Director with Sask Pulse Growers. Carl, thanks a lot.
Thanks, Shaun.
We've got one more stop on this tour through the Saskatchewan Crop Commission AGMs that happened this week in Saskatoon. Up next, it's Brett Halstead, former chair of Sask Wheat. He'll join us when we come back. You're listening to RealAg on the Weekend, 650 CKOM and 980 CGME.
I'm Lindsay Smith from RealAgriculture.com. Join me Monday nights for The Agronomists, a 1-hour live and interactive show broadcast across YouTube, Facebook, and X. Monday nights at 8 p.m. Eastern, I host expert agronomists from all over the country to give you answers to some of the toughest agronomic questions. Join us live or catch the replay Tuesday morning. That's The Agronomists with me, Lindsay Smith, Monday nights live at 8 p.m. Eastern.
Hi, I'm Bernard Tobin, host of the Soybean School on RealAgriculture.com. Throughout the year, on the Soybean School, we'll bring you timely agronomic video content from planting to harvest, from the latest agronomic research to the latest in production technology. Check out our massive video library on YouTube, RealAgriculture.com, or download the audio podcast versions wherever you get your podcasts. The Soybean School is brought to you by Pride Seeds, BASF, and Syngenta Canada.
Welcome back to RealAg on the Weekend. I want to encourage everybody here over the weekend to check out RealAgriculture.com. We got a great amount of content that we've produced on a weekly basis that you don't hear here on this RealAg on the Weekend show. Some of it you do, but not all of it. Market updates, interviews about the weather forecast, and as we think about what's outside. Just agronomy, just a lot of stuff. And so I encourage you to check it out, RealAgriculture.com. Okay, we're going to finish up with Sask Wheat, and right after the Sask Wheat AGM, I had Brett Halstead, farmer from Saskatchewan, past chair of Sask Wheat as of this week. He pulled over on the side of the road, and we chatted about the Sask Wheat AGM.
Yeah, about 2 hours ago, our AGM finished up, and at the tail end of the AGM, I become the past chair, and our board elected a new chair, which is Jake Legui from the Weyburn area.
Yeah, cool. Well, I know Jake very, very well. I'm sure he will do a really good job. So as you reflect on your time as chair, I believe it was 4 years, Brett, what's something that kind of sticks out in your mind as something that the organization accomplished that you're kind of proud of?
4 years have gone by pretty quick, and it started with the pandemic, and things seemed to roll along pretty slowly at first there, but obviously, the business of wheat research and so on, we tried to keep that going. There was some delays with COVID, but, we tried to get through that the best we could, like just about everybody else. One of the things I'm really proud of this past year, we merged with the Saskatchewan Winter Cereals Development Commission, and that all become official on August 1st. So I think that's, one big step forward for our organization, but for growers of all cereals.
Why do you think that's an important step?
Well, they're a smaller organization, so they spend a lot of their money just keeping themselves alive and the day-to-day operations and so on. And then it makes it difficult to fund and put the money into, the future things that we need to do. So by working together and trying to keep those crops, which is mainly winter wheat, fall rye, and winter cereals, going as healthy options for producers. They may not have a lot of acres in Saskatchewan right now, but maybe next year or a few years from now, there's going to be a bigger need for them for whatever environmental or just weather reasons. So I think it's really important because we're all the same farmers, and the more profitable options we have out there, the better.
So on that note, what do you think? Do you think that there's more consolidation in the future for farm groups, or is it really kind of too hard to tell?
Yeah, I don't want to give too much away from other AGMs, but I sat through the canola one here in Saskatchewan, and they're working on some things the same as we did with winter cereals with flax. So that's fairly public, but I don't know if there's any other discussions beyond that right now, but possibly in the future as, costs, I want to keep the costs from rising too much for administration, and and put them towards the important programs that we feel are important for all producers.
Well, all good AGMs come with some resolutions. What were the resolutions this year?
Yeah, we had one on HVK to examine the benefits of having HVK in the system. Some say there's little to no milling or baking property improvements with higher HVK. We also heard in the discussions that some come to Canada just to buy the dark red wheat, even though maybe a bleached wheat is just as good if it's got all the other properties that are still good. So that's on the agenda for both our organization. Grain Commission heard that, and it'll be on the discussion docket for their Western Standards Committee meeting this spring, and we'll try and do a little background work on that.
What was the other resolution?
The other one was a producer was interested in getting farmers to see more of the Vancouver port and understand how that works. So that hasn't come before our board either. These are just taken as advice. So that one would be to partner with other organizations and see if we can get some producers to go through the Vancouver port tours and understand how the workings of that goes a little better.
You know, there's something to be said for, well, one, to see with your own eyes. I think there's always something valuable to be, you know, boots on the ground, and because, you know, pictures and sometimes don't do something justice. But, you know, I think for the most part, you know, farmers, we're impacted by all these different pieces down the value chain, especially when it comes to transportation, right? So
yeah,
spends all of his, you know, the growing season working hard, produce the crop, get in the bin, deliver it to the elevator. But, you know, and sometimes we think we understand the constraints and barriers and the operations of that elevator, and then bring the railways in. Then we've got lots of opinions on what could improve the railway.
Yeah.
And then you talk about the terminals, and that's a whole different bailiwick. I guess it's not about telling them what to do. I think farmers would benefit from just having a better understanding about what those, no different than we like when the railways try to better understand what farmers are dealing with. We should do the same other way.
Yeah, that's, good point. And, we're going to take this under consideration and discuss it with some other organizations and see where it goes from there.
You also mentioned to me that you received some feedback. You're always asking for feedback from the people that attended the AGM. What was some of the feedback?
Yeah, they liked us working together with other organizations. Sask Crops has done a number of joint presentations or joint submissions in particular on environmental and sustainability issues with the feds. So they liked that. They also wanted to see if we could work towards more of a conference style and have a little more information other than AGMs. So a little history on that here in Saskatchewan is we've bounced around a little bit and changed kind of our formats and our locations. And we actually had a crop sphere event at one time. Yeah. Pretty sure you've been there before. Prairie Land wanted us at the show, so we went there for a while. Then they didn't have space for us at the show, so we went to the WDM, which is the Western Development Museum this year, and they're doing just a day of AGMs for various organizations. So I think the message there was they do like a little bit of other information, whether that's agronomic or marketing or things like that.
Drag them out, the draw card, right? So
yeah,
and it's hard to try to figure out what the right, how it should exactly look, and you're never going to make everybody happy, but it's good to get that feedback from the membership. Good turnout for the AGM?
And maybe doing some good different things is good too. Doesn't have to be the same thing all the time. Yeah, very good turnout. We had just under 100 producers and probably just over 100 observers from the ag industry.
Good stuff. Any mention of the Canada Grain Act review at all? Did that come up at all?
Just in relation to a former resolution we had on the export contract reporting, or the export sales reporting, sorry. So that actually may be part of the discussion in the Grain Act review. So that was just my answer to the question on that resolution, because we've heard that it's getting closer, but we've heard that for several years too.
If you have any feedback on today's show, you can definitely send me an email, shaney@realagriculture.com. Thanks, everybody, for joining me here today on Real Ag on the weekend. Enjoy this cold weather, and we'll talk to you again next week. Cheers, everybody.